Hi, I'm Yeaner. I've created this motion graphic, and in this video I will show you how I made it. For a better understanding, this video is divided into 5 parts. From a quick overview to getting my illustration ready for animation, to import, setup and so on. Finally, the animation, including various animation techniques in compositing with rendering. To loop the animation, I used an unconventional method, so be surprised. But before we start, let's take a quick look over the programs I used. The illustration was done using Krita. It's a powerful and great alternative tool to Photoshop. Krita is open source and completely free. It comes with its own animation tools, but we don't use them in this video. And the animation was made in Blender. It's one of the most powerful 3D software you can use. It's also completely free and open source. So you can create a motion graphic without spending any money for programs. Now let's get into the video. Quickly, let's take a look at my layer workflow. I have one layer group which my drawing is inside. By the way, you can color your layers easily. Press the right mouse button and choose a color. Inside the group there are 2 main layers, line art and color. These are also groups, one layer of your hand and one of your body. The overlay and texture layer fills the void in the image. I've created this artwork for my YouTube banner. So with this size mask layer, I can choose a canvas size. Okay, above the draw group, it exists some other layers like color correction, chromatic aberration and text. After finishing the illustration, I had the idea to animate it. So I had to modify my layer management. Here you can see that the layers have to be divided into different body parts, like hair, eyes, hands and so on. To do this, use the freehand selection tool. For the lines, it's simple. Select it and right click, cut selection to a new layer. Colors are a bit more difficult. To cut out, the cursor must be moved precisely over the canvas on the line. Later, when the hair will move, we will see the edge of the cut. So the next step is to paint the hair slightly over the edge behind the head. For me, as a lazy artist, this is a hard piece of work. If you made your own motion graphic, it's better to paint from beginning on different layers. Next, hide all layers, except the one to be exported. Repeat this step for all layers. Open up Blender. First, select all objects with A and delete it with pressing X. For your understanding, every time I press a key, you see that in the right bottom corner. Then we need to activate an add-on. Navigate to Edit and Preferences. In there, go to Add-ons and search Import Images as Planes. Set the marker and close the window. Now we can import images as a plane. In the Import Option menu, you can set the height of the plane. By default it's 1 meter. To make it later easier, set your own value. I enter 9 because my size ratio is 9:16. You can also use your pixel size of your image. For me it's 1440 pixels. But don't enter too big numbers, so better use 1.44 meters if you don't know your size ratio. The add-on gives us a base and we need to modify these a little bit. But before, let's adjust a few scene settings. Switch from the default resolution to your image resolution. Change it from viewport view to material shading. Normally, the texture looks slightly different from the source file. That's because the color filter is used. So change it to standard to get the original. If you like, you can also experiment with the look. This option takes the look further away from your source file. Next, add a camera. In the camera settings, choose orthographic instead perspective. Later we will stack the planes on top of each other like layers. In perspective view, we see this. In orthographic view, it looks more like what we want. And I enter 16 or 2.560 in the orthographic scale. If you remember it, this is the image wide. In the material preview we are currently in. Materials are shadeless. That's not the final look. Let's switch to the render preview. Now the world color illuminate the plane. But we don't want that, so the material has to be adjusted. Delete the principal shader and connect the color to the output. Without a shader, the texture will be displayed without any lighting. The next step is to copy the object, rename it, and move it up to create the next layer. Both layers now have the same material, so duplicate the material, rename it, and select the next texture. From now on, the next texture we want to import will have an alpha channel. This means a part of the image is transparent, like here. When we connect the alpha channel to the output, we see the image must be displayed in the white area. The principal shader has an alpha input, but we don't use it anymore. So we have to mix transparency over the black. Black is a factor of 0 and white is a factor of 1. I go to edit mode and use loop cuts to cut out the motif and delete the vertices we don't need anymore. The next step is to copy the object, rename it and move it up to create the next layer. Duplicate the material, rename it and select the next texture. The hair is a complex shape, so I cut it out with the knife tool. After that, I delete the unnecessary vertices and divide the n-gons into quads. You see here, I did this for all layers. For a better overview, I also placed the objects in different collections. Select an object and press M. Choose a collection or create a new one. Some objects are distracting. Use the disable selection function for better handling. And you can hide an object or collection by using the eye icon or pressing H. Unhide all objects with Alt H. First, choose a frame rate you like and set an end frame. 500 frames long and 60 frames per second, which means the clip will be approximately 8 seconds long. Switch to the animation tab. On the left window, choose the graph editor. Now we are ready. Select the object you want to animate. Go to frame 0 and press I to make a keyframe. Now the object data such as position, rotation and scaling have been saved in the timeline. Go to frame 80 and move the hand a little bit to the right. Press I and we have created an animation. In the graph editor you can move or adjust the keyframe. Blender is very difficult to understand, so I want to explain it. But if you play around with the graph, you will see what it does. We see the animation is not smooth. Copy the first frame of the animation and move it to the end. Now the animation is cycled. It's important that the first keyframe is set on frame 0 and the animation starts at frame 1. This way we skip the first keyframe and prevent it from being displayed twice. And the object rotates around the origin. You can move it. Use the 3D cursor and automatically stick to surfaces, or use the cursor to selection function to position the cursor. Switch to object mode and set the origin to the 3D cursor. I have used this simple method in combination with other techniques in many areas, for the iris, the hand or her body. To animate the head, I utilized shape keys. I subdivide the plane a few times and adjust the vertices a bit to her shape. push the G key 3 times and move the vertices freely in space. But it's important to press numpad 7 to go in top orthographic view. Go to Object Data and add the first shape key. The geometry is now stored in the basis. Add another shape key. With the selected key 1, go to Edit mode. I select all vertices that belong the head and add a vertex group. Assign it, we will need this later. I move the head a little bit. I go back to object mode. Her body looks the same as before. The change would be saved in key 1. If I move the value from 0 to 1, Blender interpolates between the base and key 1. We can animate the value by simply moving the cursor over the value and pressing I. The iris and the eyelashes are individual objects, so they don't follow the head when it moves. To achieve this, I select the iris and add a constraint. The child of constraint copies the position of the target relative to its own position. Make sure you are in frame 0 and add the constraint. Then press Z inverse to update the position. The highlights have a constraint that has the iris at its target. For more dynamic, I have lowered the influence to create a small lag. For the eye animation, I use stop motion techniques. I do several variations of the eye, from open and half open to closed. In Blender I simply imported them via drag and drop. I add a mix node and connect the color output to the B input of the mix node. Now I can switch back and forth between the input A and the input B. To add a next texture, I use the mix node again. I do the same for the alpha. With Ctrl G, I create a group, add the vector of both mix nodes to the input. Pressing Tab takes you back out of the group. Now you can switch between the pictures. To make the keyframes, it works in the same way as shape keys. Animate with bones. Place the 3D cursor on the object, which should get bones. Add a bone, rotate in object mode and apply the rotation. In edit mode I move the tip of the bone to the end of the hair. I subdivide the bone several times and place it correctly. With the shortcut E you can also add bones. I select stick in the viewport display and activate in front to see the bones through objects. Next, the wig has to be connected to the hair. In object mode, first select the mesh and then the wig, Ctrl P with automatic weights. Now, when I go into pose mode, I can move the hair. To make the hair swing, we add constraints. Select the bone at the top and then the bone below. Press Ctrl Shift and C, add damp drag constraint. I have lowered the influence to create a small lag. I repeat this for all bones except the first one at the root. I add a child of constraint to this and set the body as target. And I selected a previously created vertex group called hair joint. The hair now follows the body, or more precisely, it follows the vertex group. To make the hair swing more, you can also animate the first bone. Let's render a single image with F12. I will add chromatic aberration and a small text to the animation. To implement this, I use compositing nodes. This is the input, the rendered image, and the final output, what will be stored in the folder. To see the image coming out of this cable, add a viewer node. Another option to display it is using the image editor and choose the viewer node. To add the chromatic aberration, I separate the color in different channels and then put them back together. With the translation node, I can move the channel and thus create the effect. Chromatic aberration makes the image blurry and out of focus. To set the focus, her face must not have this effect. So we need a mask. Add a ellipse mask, adjust its size and make it blurry. The chromatic aberration should be displayed in the black area, while the white area should show her face without this effect. With a mix node, add a little white to the black to weaken the effect. Next, the text. Import it, and with the alpha over node, the text is placed over the image. Connect the composite node to the end, and we are done. Before we can render the animation, we need to set some settings. Go to the output properties. In there, choose the directory where the file will be exported. Use FFmpeg as a file format. In the encoding settings, I set MPEG 4. Okay, go to render and render animation. After rendering, let's take a look at the result. It looks good. The only thing I don't like that the animation is not cycle. But in viewport it looks seamless. I'm not a programmer, but I think the reason for this is that the constraint calculates the position of the bone using the position of the previous frame. This means in viewport, when the timeline restarts on frame 1, the modifier uses the position of the last frame, frame 500, to calculate the position of the bone. The timeline will not reset during rendering, so the result is different. Here comes the trick. Select all objects, next use the viewport render keyframe function and then render the animation. Now the animation is seamless. And this is the final loop. Thank you for watching and I hope you enjoy it.